Hello everyone, I'm Emily Johansson from Pennsylvania. Since my ancestors were Swedish aristocrats, my siblings and I were brought up in very strict traditions. Since my ancestors were Swedish aristocrats, my siblings and I were brought up in very strict traditions. That is, our life was full of discipline. So, I was pretty fed up with the rules and I hoped for a carefree life in college. Penn State is a public university and one of the oldest in the country. Due to my sickness, I arrived at campus a week late, and the dorm staff put me in a room with one other student. I was lucky with it because usually 3 or 4 people live together. But I was delighted too early. In the evening, when my roommate came, she made such a scandal that I had to call the supervisor. As it turns out, she wanted to live alone. Her ignorance was outstanding. This was a public space, and her parents did not own it. Of course, my mood was ruined. Elsa, as I was introduced to her, was a tall, skinny girl. She was blonde with a beautiful tan. Despite her screams and bullying, she seemed like an interesting person. I could feel her confidence and her strong will. Then she calmed down and began shamelessly questioning me and looked at my stuff as if in a store. This all kind of calmed me down a bit. I took a walk around campus and had dinner at a nice cafe. Closer to bedtime, I returned to the room and I was about to unpack all my things and take my makeup off when Alexa said sleep and turned off the lights. I was shocked and outraged by her behavior and gathered up the courage to turn on the light again and continue my business. Then she got up and threw my bag out of the window and, threatening me, turned off the lights again. Apparently, she had training in the morning. I realized that she was much stronger than me and I silently went to bed, although I could not sleep. I just lay there listening to the sounds of the night, afraid to move. Of course, I fell asleep in the morning. But I was awakened by loud noises with which Alexa was getting ready. She shook me twice to ask where her sneakers were, and then she made me go out for cream so that she could have tea. Sleepily, I did everything she asked and collapsed onto my bed later on. In the classroom, the fellow students came up to me and asked me with a smile, what was it like living with Alexa? Have I lost my mind yet? It turned out that all the girls ran away from her. Alexa was just a disaster. She did all this to live alone in the room. I had a choice, to move out silently or to fight with Alexa. Knowing my gentle nature, I chose the first option. But my Swedish ancestors were not gentle people. They demanded war. I still had that Viking blood in me. In the evening, I heard noises from afar, loud laughter and music. Our room was a dance floor at that moment. They did not even notice me. I squeezed over to my bed and saw a couple kissing. Well, of course, I politely asked them to leave, but nobody reacted. To be honest, they could not even see me because the room was so dark and there was a lot of noise. I left my bag and went to the supervisor. He was apparently very busy as he opened the door only 10 minutes later. I described the whole situation to him. He said that he was very busy and tried to get rid of me, but I went on a tantrum and hardly dragged him to our room. But what? We had perfect silence and Alexa was deep in her sleep. Then the supervisor exploded and yelled at me for this stupid prank. At some point, I doubted whether there really was a party just a few minutes ago. He said that he had no time to play games with me and wanted to take away my residence card. We went to his place again, where he also screamed not to bother him over such small things. And so I went back. When I returned, the room was still shaking from the noisy party. I was terrified and silently sat in the corner, realizing that Alexa was just mocking me. So life continued like that, and my desire to resist her was just disappearing. She took my things without asking and did not return them. It was fine as long as she was using them carefully, but she was just irresponsible. For example, she could take my night cream and squeeze half of it at once and throw it away. Or she could put on my jacket and forget it somewhere. Once, without asking, she took my brand new panties. Her daily routine was deliberately different from mine. She had parties when I needed to sleep and demanded silence when I was preparing for my classes. As a result, I developed insomnia, migraine, and apathy. My academic performance dropped to 0. I had to do something. I talked with my Viking ancestors in my head and tried to explain that my health and school were more important than winning a victory over this monster. I lived like a sleepwalker. Others were surprised when I walked out of our room. They were sure that I would run away from her in a month. And yes, I even began to have an obsessive thought, to run away from her. I finally went to the supervisor to give me another room. He was very surprised that I did not like that girl. He did not find any good reason to help me. He said that he was busy with the repairs around campus. In short, he kicked me off. I walked not knowing where. I Emily Johansson, an 18-year-old girl from Allentown who had brave Swedish ancestors who, according to her school yearbook, was an emotionally mature, sociable and tolerant student, sat on a bench in a Penn State college park, not knowing how to live, ready to burst into tears or throw a tantrum. I suddenly saw a very strange person who reminded me of someone. It was a plump, 60-year-old woman in an outdated outfit and with heavy trunks. The taxi driver who pointed to our dorm building drove off quickly. She saw me and called me with a gesture as if we knew each other. She had an open, kind, and shameless look to her. She made me take her heavy trunks and drag them into our room. It was Alexa's aunt. I took her to our room and this woman started talking a lot. Since Alexa's phone was off, I was the one to hear about the joys and the road here and the wishes of the relatives. Aunt Elsa spoke without stopping and without logic. She was a funny, positive woman. She has tugged my cheeks more than once, scolding my parents for my thinness and forcing me to eat natural foods. In an hour, all my negativity and depression disappeared. I laughed at her stories of village life with all the juicy details. This woman healed me. In the course of the story, she managed to cry a couple of times. It turns out that Aunt Elsa was the older sister of Alexa's dad, who died a couple of years ago, and her mom died during childbirth, and Alexa's mom died during childbirth, so she was an orphan. Now, a lot has become clear to me: her character, her painful reaction to the subject of family, her anger. After a couple of hours, Aunt Elsa left. I sat and remembered how I behaved with Alexa. I always walked sad, hated her, did not try to have a heart-to-heart with her, and the most disgusting thing was that I bought an iron safe and hid all my things from her. When Alexa came, she immediately saw the traces of her aunt's stay. She looked at me carefully, studying whether she told me about her parents. I did not know how to hide anything and showed my pity for her. This infuriated her. She started yelling at me. She said that she would not tolerate anyone's pity, and she said to shove mine somewhere far away. I just smiled. Now there was no hatred for her, but just human sympathy. But since then, our relationship began to change. There was no longer that aggression between us, which she expressed openly, I secretly. I began to ask her for help over trifles, and she did it with pleasure. She could take a spider out into the street without fear, or run into a rude guy who offended me. I pulled out all my things and stopped paying attention to them, and was surprised when one day she asked for my beautiful jacket. I pulled out all my things and stopped paying attention to them, and was surprised when one day she asked for my best jacket. I gave it to her and was delighted because she looked very beautiful. And then she suddenly confessed that she was in love with Herbert. I was so glad that she opened up to me. I don't know why, but I hugged her, saying I was happy for her. We looked into each other's eyes and both smiled. She said, "Why are you happy? After all, I'm the one who fell in love. It's my life, isn't it?" I said, "When you're happy, I'm happy, and I will always be." Herbert Hoover was a very interesting guy, but he came from a family of oligarchs. Herbert himself began to like Alexa. Apparently, he was drawn to the exotic. After all, Alexa was a girl from village. Once, she went on a date with him and came back all radiant, but something bothered her. She said that she was lost when she was at a dinner with aristocrats and ran away, saying that she was bored and agreed to go on a picnic with him. I began to teach Alexa good manners. We even acted it all out. I was the guy and she was herself. I told her how to get in and out of the car, what to order, how to use the cutlery, how to go to the bathroom, what colors to combine, and how to have small talk. In general, how to behave in a noble society. Once Herbert invited Alex and me to a picnic. Everyone was there. The nature was simply gorgeous, a forest and a lake. He greeted me warmly when he found out that I was a close friend of Alexa's. Out of politeness, he started the conversation and I continued. For some reason, the conversation turned to the topics of oligarchs, about investments. I shared my thoughts and Herbert seriously listened. But it was nothing special. It's just what I heard from Dad and his rich friends. By unspoken understanding, he went to the picnic as Alexa's boyfriend. But the fact that he talked to me a lot strained everyone. As a well-mannered girl, I was supposed to keep up the conversation, not running away from it. And in general, the situation reached a dead end when Herbert invited me to take a boat ride on the lake. Everyone who heard this fell silent. I looked at Alexa, but she was embarrassed. I got onto the boat and Alexa looked at me. I managed to wink at her. Out of the corner of my ear, I heard the words, "Let's get drunk," when we pushed off the coast. We were away for 40 minutes, and when we returned, I saw that Alexa and the several other guys were not there. I asked to take me home. A friend of Herbert drove me. On campus, Alexa sat by a bench, and she looked calm. I immediately ran up to her, hugged her, and then tried to explain myself, but she just said that I could take Herbert. I did not insist and went to bed. The next morning, someone's gentle hands woke me up, and warm lips kissed my forehead in a friendly way, just like my mother did. It was Alexa. I was surprised. She asked me with a smile, "Silly girl, why did you just say that nonsense to Herbert? He called me and asked me for forgiveness, and said that he was ready to pay for your treatment." Yes, yesterday I told him that I would soon die, after which he immediately stopped caring for me. I looked at Alexa, seriously made a sad face, took a deep breath, and silently rolled over to the other side, saying, "His money just won't help." Alexa stopped stroking me. Her hands stopped stroking me. Then she hugged me very tightly, pressed her face into my hair, and fell silent. It seemed to me that I had overdone the game. I immediately rushed to make the excuses that, they won't help, because they won't be useful, because I'm not sick with anything like that. And I ran away. Then Alexa got mad and began to chase me, and I laughed and kept running. This is the story that happened to me in my first year of college. If you like this story, then like it and write us some comments, and don't forget to subscribe.